This is my true story. I am an old man with a weak heart, kept alive by a handful of pills and a prayer. My son promised to help me, to bring my medicine, to take care of me like I once took care of him. I trusted him because that's what fathers do. But trust is a dangerous thing when given to the wrong person. One day I learned what he had really done with my medicine, and what I saw broke something deeper than my heart. Before I continue, tell me, if you discovered your own child had betrayed your trust in this way, would you forgive or would you fight back? Subscribe so you don't miss what I did next. For years, I lived quietly, keeping to my small routine, morning tea, evening prayer, and a small box of pills that kept my heart beating steady. My health had grown fragile. The doctor said my medicine wasn't optional. It was life itself, measured in tiny white tablets and slow doses. Each day, I marked the bottles carefully, counting what I had left. I told my son everything, trusting him like I once trusted my own heartbeat. He was my only child. His mother had passed years ago, and I thought caring for me would bring him closer to the father who raised him alone. When he said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll handle your medicine," my heart softened. I thought I was blessed. An old man with a son who still remembered his duty. He went to the pharmacy every week, collected the refills, and smiled when he handed them to me. "You just rest," he'd say. "I've got you." I believed him. Fathers always want to believe their sons. You spend years teaching them right from wrong, and when life turns dark, you hope they'll carry your lessons like light in their pocket. I never imagined mine would use that light to burn me instead. At first, everything seemed fine. He'd remind me to take my pills, pour me water, and even help me sit when the weakness got bad. I'd thank him, my voice trembling from age more than sickness. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "Don't worry, old man. You're safe." And I believed him. Every word. There were nights when he'd bring me dinner, talk about his job, and make me laugh like we used to. I thought maybe my illness had given us a new kind of bond. The kind that comes when a son finally understands what it means to protect his parent. I even told my friends how lucky I was. "He's a good boy," I said. Not many sons would care like that. But the truth was slower, quieter, and crueler than I could see. It started in the smallest ways. A missing pill here, a bottle that felt lighter than it should. I told myself maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I had taken one too many. Old age can play tricks on the mind. And I wanted to believe the problem was me, not him. Because believing otherwise meant facing something worse than sickness. It meant facing betrayal. Some mornings I'd wake up dizzy. My vision would blur, my breath would come short, and I'd wonder if my heart was finally giving up. My son would show up late, tired eyes and restless hands, saying, "I'll go get your next refill soon." And I'd smile through my weakness, grateful just to see him. That's what blind trust does. It makes even pain look like love. He told me he was managing the costs, that the pharmacy sometimes ran out, that there were delays. I nodded, too tired to argue. He'd promise, "Tomorrow, Dad. You'll have everything you need tomorrow." And I believed it, because I wanted to. It's strange how sickness doesn't just make your body weak. It makes your heart desperate for kindness, even when it's false. In the evenings, when I sat alone, I'd think about how proud his mother would have been to see him taking care of me. I imagined her smile from heaven, the same one she had when she held him as a child. Those thoughts comforted me. They made the long nights softer, the pain quieter. I didn't know that while I was holding on to memories, he was holding on to my medicine for reasons I couldn't yet imagine. A father's love is a kind of blindness. It doesn't look for proof. It doesn't suspect. It just believes. I had spent my life building trust, and now I was handing it to him without question. I didn't see the signs. I didn't notice the way his hands trembled when he gave me my pills, or how his eyes darted away when I asked how things were going. I thought he was tired, overworked, maybe stressed. I never thought he was lying. If I had looked closer, if I had listened harder, I might have noticed the cracks in his voice. But I didn't. I thought love meant faith, and faith meant never doubting your own child. I see now that I was wrong. I gave him everything, my trust, my keys, my health, and in return, he gave me a lie dressed as love. That was the father I was, too trusting, too proud, too blind. I thought I was being cared for. I thought I was being loved. But what I was really being was used. It began with confusion, not anger. Some mornings I'd reach for my medicine box and find it lighter than I remembered. A few pills missing here and there. I told myself maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I had taken an extra dose in the night, or maybe the doctor had changed my schedule, and I simply didn't recall. Old minds can be uncertain, and I didn't want to sound paranoid. Still, something didn't sit right. I counted the pills each night before bed. 18 one day, 15 the next, then 13. The numbers slipped away faster than they should have. My son came by, smiling like nothing was wrong. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he asked. I told him the bottles felt lighter. He laughed softly, almost too quickly. "The pharmacy probably made a mistake," he said. "They always mess up the counts. I'll fix it next time." His tone was gentle, reassuring, and I wanted to believe him. I nodded, forcing a smile, though my heart tightened. He had been so reliable, so careful, so kind since my health declined. I couldn't imagine him doing anything wrong. Still, when he left that night, I opened the cabinet again, double-checked the labels, and shook the bottles one by one. The sound of pills rattling inside felt thinner than before, like hearing an echo instead of a voice. Days passed. The dizziness came more often. My hands trembled even when I wasn't cold. Once I woke up on the floor, not remembering how I got there. My breath came shallow, my heart slow. When my son arrived that afternoon, he looked startled, almost guilty. "You forgot to take your medicine," he said. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The bottle had been nearly empty. Still, I said nothing. When you grow old, you start to question yourself more than others. You think maybe your memory is fading, maybe you're being too suspicious. And so, instead of confronting him, I apologized. "Maybe I did forget," I whispered. He smiled and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll handle everything." That line, "I'll handle everything," became his shield, and my mistake was letting it stand between us. Each week, the pattern repeated. He would bring new bottles from the pharmacy, always slightly opened, seals half torn. When I asked about it, he said the staff checked them before giving them out. "Standard procedure now," he explained. I wanted to believe that too. A father wants peace more than he wants proof. One morning, after he left, I took a closer look at one of the bottles. The pills were the same color, but not the same shape. Some were chipped, some smaller than usual. My doctor had told me these pills came from one company only, all uniform, all precise. My gut twisted. Still, I hesitated. What kind of father accuses his own son? What kind of man doubts the boy he raised with his own hands? I decided to call the pharmacy myself. The woman on the phone checked her records and said something that chilled me. "Sir, your refill hasn't been collected in 2 weeks." I froze. 2 weeks? But my son had brought bottles just 3 days ago. I thanked her quietly and hung up the phone, pretending my hands weren't shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the medicine bottles lined up on the table. My mind spun with memories. The boy who once held my hand when crossing the street, who cried when his mother died, who promised to take care of me when I got old. Was that the same person who was now stealing from me? The next morning, I tested a small dose. Within hours, I felt weak, nauseous, unsteady. It wasn't the medicine I was prescribed, I was sure of it. He had replaced some, stolen others, and lied to my face each time. But why? What could he possibly gain from my illness? The thought made me sick long before the pills did. When he came that evening, I asked, "Did you pick up my medicine today?" He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Yes, Dad. I always do." His calmness frightened me more than his lie. Because that's when I realized it wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a choice. And choices like that don't happen by accident. I sat there watching him, feeling something inside me harden. A part of me still wanted to believe he'd tell the truth, that he'd break down and confess. But he didn't. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and walked out with his phone in his hand. The same hand that had taken my life piece by piece, one pill at a time. That night, I knew something dark had begun. I didn't have the full truth yet, but the silence between us no longer felt like peace. It felt like danger. After that day, I started watching him closely. The lies didn't come all at once. They grew slowly, like weeds in a garden I had neglected too long. My son began changing in small ways that only a father would notice. His clothes smelled faintly of smoke and alcohol when he visited. His eyes, once calm and clear, now flickered with restlessness. He spoke fast, laughed too loud, and carried his phone everywhere like it was a shield. When I asked simple questions, his answers came coated in charm and half-truths. "Work's been hard. Just tired, Dad. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. He had started coming less often, sometimes skipping days without a call. When I asked if he had refilled my prescription, he'd smile, reach into his pocket, and pull out a bottle before I could say another word. I noticed how the seal was already broken, how he avoided my eyes as he handed it to me. Once, when I asked if he wanted to stay for dinner, he said, "Can't tonight," and rushed out before the soup had even cooled. He never used to run from home. Now, he couldn't leave fast enough. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Illness can make the mind cruel. It whispers suspicions that have no proof. But each day, my body weakened, my heart slowed, and the world began to tilt under my feet. Something was wrong, and I couldn't deny it anymore. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I heard him talking outside the door. His voice was low, sharp, anxious. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough. "Yeah, I got it. Same brand. He doesn't know." My stomach turned cold. I stayed silent, pretending to doze in my chair when he walked in. He smiled like nothing had happened, asked about my day, poured me a glass of water. I took it, pretending not to notice his trembling hands. The lies grew bolder. Sometimes, he'd claim the doctor had changed my dosage, fewer pills per day. Other times, he'd say the pharmacy ran out of stock, that we'd have to make do until next week. I knew it wasn't true. I called the doctor once myself. He told me there had been no change. When I mentioned it to my son, his face hardened. "You don't trust me now?" he snapped. The hurt in his voice sounded rehearsed, and I, like a fool, apologized. "Of course I trust you, son." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but I said them anyway, because a father's love doesn't die easily. It dies slowly, painfully. He began to act secretive with his phone, always turning it away when messages came. He'd step outside to take calls, pacing the porch in the dark, whispering into the receiver. Sometimes he'd disappear for hours, saying he had errands or work meetings. When he returned, his eyes were red, his smile forced. He smelled of smoke and strangers. The boy I had raised was fading before my eyes, replaced by a man I didn't recognize. The nights became longer. I couldn't sleep, not from pain, but from unease. I'd sit by the window, watching the streetlights glow while my thoughts wandered into dark places. I began to fear him, not in the way a man fears violence, but in the way a father fears knowing the truth about his child. Every knock on the door made my heart race. Every sound outside felt like the echo of a lie I hadn't uncovered yet. Once I followed him quietly as he left the house. He didn't notice me at first. He met a group of young men by the corner store, laughter spilling out like drunken noise. They looked wild, careless, alive in a way I hadn't seen in him for years. I watched from across the street as he reached into his bag, pulled out a familiar orange bottle, my medicine, and handed it over. They clapped him on the back, laughing, shaking his hand. My vision blurred, not from my illness, but from heartbreak. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I knew what was happening. I returned home quietly that night, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. The lies had grown roots deep into the soil of my house. They filled the air, the silence, the small moments that used to feel safe. I still loved him. I couldn't stop that. But I had begun to love the truth more. It's strange how a father can feel both love and disgust at the same time, how you can pray for your son's redemption while planning how to uncover his deceit. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, and soon clarity came. Not through words, but through pictures that would show me just how far my boy had fallen. The truth always finds a way to knock, even when you don't want to answer the door. For me, it came one quiet afternoon, wrapped in the voice of my neighbor, Mr. Patel, a kind man who had lived next door for 20 years. He was the type who waved every morning, who helped me fix the fence when my back couldn't take the strain anymore. That day, he stood at my doorstep with worry on his face, his hands clutching his phone like it carried a burden he didn't want to deliver. "Sir," he said softly, "I'm sorry if this sounds strange, but I think you should see something." I thought maybe he meant a problem with the yard, or the mail, or even something about my health. I never imagined what he meant. He hesitated before showing me his phone. "It's about your son," he whispered. My chest tightened. My son? For a moment, I wanted to tell him to stop. I didn't want to hear bad news. I didn't want to see anything that would confirm the fears I had been pushing away for weeks. But something in his eyes told me I couldn't hide anymore. He tapped his screen, opened a social media page, and scrolled to a post. My hands shook as I took the phone. There, staring back at me, was my son, smiling, laughing, surrounded by his friends. The photo looked innocent at first, until my eyes caught the details. On the table in front of them were my prescription bottles, the ones that kept me alive. My name printed clearly on the labels. My medicine, lined up like trophies beside half-empty glasses and smoke curling through the air. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mr. Patel spoke again, his voice low. "I saw your name on the bottles, sir." I thought maybe it was something serious. I didn't want to interfere, but he stopped because he didn't need to say more. The truth was already roaring in my head. I stared at those pictures, my son holding my pills like party favors, posing with his friends, smiling as though he'd done something clever. The comments underneath made my stomach twist. People laughed, joked, called it crazy, wild, epic. They had no idea those pills weren't his. They were mine. They were meant to keep my heart steady, my life balanced. And there they were, turned into entertainment for strangers. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. Mr. Patel gently took it back, his eyes full of pity. "I'm sorry, sir," he said again. "I thought you should know." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat felt like it had closed. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Tears would have meant pain. What I felt was something colder, disbelief wrapped in shame. After he left, I sat alone in my chair, staring at the wall. The house was silent, but inside my head, there was noise. The laughter from the photos, the comments, the lies. Every sound was an echo of betrayal. I replayed every moment with my son, his smiles, his excuses, his hands holding those bottles. I saw it now, the broken seals, the mismatched pills, the missing doses. It all made sense. I wanted to tell myself there was some mistake, that maybe it was a prank, a misunderstanding, a cruel joke. But there were too many pictures. Different days, different clothes, same bottles, same names. My name. Each photo was a confession he hadn't meant to make. As evening fell, I turned on the lamp beside me and opened the small drawer where I kept the leftover bottles. I lifted one, stared at the label. My name, my dosage, my doctor's note. Everything clear, precise. I held it up, imagining how it must have looked when he showed it off to his friends, laughing while his father grew weaker at home. My heart didn't just hurt. It ached in a way no medicine could cure. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like his father. I felt like a stranger looking at someone else's child. The boy I had raised, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, had turned my illness into his amusement. And worse, he didn't even hide it. He wanted the world to see. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the same chair until dawn, my hands resting on the bottle, my eyes staring at nothing. I didn't call him. I didn't shout. I just listened to the silence, heavy, cold, full of truth. Because when a father finally learns who his son really is, words stop meaning anything. Only actions remain. And I knew the next time I saw him, something inside me would never look at him the same again. The next morning, I sat at the table with my tea untouched, staring at the bottles lined neatly before me. The night had been long and merciless. I had not slept. I kept hearing my neighbor's words, seeing those pictures in my mind over and over again. My son's smile, the bottles, the smoke, the laughter. The proof had been there all along, and I had been too blind to see it. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know the full truth, no matter how much it broke me. When my son came later that morning, he was humming, pretending everything was normal. He greeted me with a grin, kissed my forehead, and asked how I was feeling. I studied his face, the tired eyes, the nervous twitch of his hand, the faint smell of cigarettes mixed with something bitter. He didn't notice the change in me. He thought I was still the trusting father who would believe any lie wrapped in a smile. "Son," I said quietly, "can I see your phone for a moment?" "I just need to call the doctor." He hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it, the flicker of panic behind his eyes. Then he forced a smile and handed it over. "Sure, Dad." Battery's low, though. His phone was unlocked. My hands shook slightly as I scrolled through his apps, pretending to look for the contact. Then I opened the photos. He tried to stop me, not by grabbing it, but with his voice. "Dad, I'll call for you. Don't worry about it." His tone had gone sharp, too quick. That was enough to confirm everything. I opened his gallery. My heart began to race. There they were, hundreds of photos. I tapped one, then another, then another. In each picture, my medicine bottles stood in the middle of tables surrounded by drinks, smoke, and laughter. My son and his friends were posing with them, holding them like props, spilling pills into their hands, even pretending to swallow them for fun. Some photos showed them mixing my medicine into cocktails, others holding up my bottles with my name clearly visible on the labels. The same name that had once meant something to him. The same name he now mocked. My stomach twisted. My throat went dry. I scrolled further and found videos too. In one, he poured out my pills onto a table, crushing them with a lighter as his friends cheered. "Dad's miracle pills," he laughed in the video. "Let's see how much of a miracle they really are." I dropped the phone. My legs felt weak. He froze when he saw my face. "Dad, wait. Those were old pictures." "It's not what it looks like, but it was exactly what it looked like. Every label had my name. Every photo had timestamps from the past few weeks. I had been getting weaker while he was stealing what kept me alive, and mocking it. Mocking me. My chest felt tight. Not just from my heart condition, but from something far worse. Heartbreak. It wasn't just the theft. It was the joy he took in it. The pride. The laughter. Somewhere in his mind, it must have felt harmless. Just fun. Just a joke. But the truth was crueler. My medicine wasn't his toy. It was the thin line between my life and my death. I picked up the phone again and scrolled in silence. The more I saw, the less I recognized him. My son, my only family, standing there with strangers, laughing at my expense, turning my suffering into something to celebrate. It was more than betrayal. It was desecration. "Dad, stop looking," he said quietly now, guilt crawling into his voice. "It's nothing serious." "We were just messing around." "Messing around?" I whispered, my eyes never leaving the screen. "With my pills? With my name?" He didn't answer. His head dropped, his hands fidgeted, his lips trembled, but no apology came. Because how do you apologize for that? I handed him the phone back slowly. my voice cold and calm. "Do you know what those pills cost me? Not in money, in pain, in time, in breath." He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't. I've heard enough from your pictures." He tried to reach for me, but I pulled away. My hands shook too much to hold anything steady, so I gripped the edge of the table to stop myself from falling. "Get out," I said. My voice cracked, but it was steady enough to make him freeze. "Go." For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at me like a stranger. Then he picked up his jacket and left. The door closed, and the silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. I sat there for hours afterward, staring at the bottles still lined up in front of me. My medicine, the very thing that kept me alive, had been turned into a game by the boy I had raised. My heart was weak before. But that day, it broke in ways no doctor could heal. After he left, the house fell into a silence that felt alive, heavy, breathing, watching me. I sat there, unable to move, the phone still glowing faintly on the table. My own name stared back at me from one of the pictures, printed neatly on a prescription label beneath a pile of pills my son had scattered like candy. Every photo, every timestamp, every smirk carved itself into my memory. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was numb, like my body had decided to protect me from feeling the full weight of what I had just seen. The boy I raised had taken what kept me alive and turned it into entertainment. He hadn't just stolen medicine, he had stolen breath. Mine. The pills I needed to steady my heart, he had used to impress his friends. He had taken my weakness and turned it into a prop. Every photo was a wound. Every laugh was a knife. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or pray. So, I did none of it. I just sat, frozen, in the same chair where I had once held him as a baby. I remembered nights when he was small and feverish, when I had carried him in my arms to the clinic in the rain. I remembered the times I had gone without food so he could have shoes for school. I remembered the long years after his mother died, how I had promised her I would raise him right, no matter how hard it got. I remembered his first words, his first bike, his first job, every proud moment that now felt like a lie I had told myself. I had given him everything, and in return, he had taken the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. The air in the room felt thick, my chest tightened, my pulse uneven. I reached for one of the bottles, holding it close, staring at my own name like it belonged to someone else. The medicine inside wasn't just a treatment, it was my lifeline. And now, every time I looked at it, I saw his fingerprints all over it. It no longer brought comfort, it brought shame. How does a father recover from that kind of betrayal? How do you keep breathing when the one you gave life to has been using your illness as entertainment? I felt a strange calm come over me, the kind that comes not from peace but from heartbreak so deep it silences you. I wasn't thinking of punishment. I wasn't thinking of revenge. I was thinking of the moment I realized my love had blinded me. I must have sat there for hours, my tea cold, my body still. The light outside shifted from afternoon to dusk. Shadows crept along the walls, wrapping around me like the past. At one point, I heard footsteps outside, laughter from the street, maybe his. For a brief second, my heart leaped, hoping he had come back to apologize. But the sound passed. He didn't return. And maybe that was better, because I didn't know what I would have said if he had. I wanted to tell him how much he had hurt me, how every lie he told had poisoned my trust, worse than any sickness could poison my blood. But deep inside, I already knew he wouldn't understand. People who mock pain don't recognize its weight until they carry it themselves. He would only offer excuses, deny the photos, twist the truth. And I was too tired to fight with lies anymore. The night fell quiet again. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, watching the small glow of my medicine bottles on the table. The labels reflected faintly in the lamplight, my name repeated again and again, a reminder of who I was and what I had almost lost. I thought of the doctor's warning. Without this medicine, your heart could stop. And it struck me like lightning. My son hadn't just disrespected me. He had risked my life for fun. That realization changed something inside me. I had been weak for weeks, thinking I was dying from illness. But now I knew. It wasn't the sickness that was killing me. It was betrayal. My body froze not from pain, but from truth. The boy I loved most had stolen the breath from my chest and sold it for laughter. I didn't cry that night. I couldn't. The tears wouldn't come. My body sat still, but my mind raced through every memory, every act of kindness, every lesson I had taught him about honesty and care. They all meant nothing now. The boy I once knew was gone, replaced by a man I didn't recognize. And so I sat there, frozen. Not in fear, not in anger, but in the quiet knowledge that the love I once thought unbreakable had finally broken. The next day, I didn't wait for him to visit. I called him. My voice was steady, almost calm, the kind of calm that comes when a storm has already passed inside you. "Come home," I said. "We need to talk." He hesitated for a moment, then agreed. I could hear music and laughter in the background when he spoke, like he was still with the same friends who had turned my pain into their party. I hung up before he could ask questions. I didn't want explanations over the phone. I wanted to see his eyes when he lied again. When he walked through the door later that afternoon, he carried his usual charm, that false smile he used to cover the truth. "What's wrong, Dad?" he asked, pretending innocence, pretending love. I pointed to the table. On it lay the phone, the printed photos I had taken from his gallery, and the half-empty bottles of my medicine. His smile faded. He froze. "Sit down," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. He obeyed, eyes darting from the photos to the floor. I watched him closely. This was the boy I had taught to speak truth, to stand tall, to never hide. Now he sat before me like a stranger cornered by his own reflection. I slid one of the photos toward him, the one where he held my prescription bottle up to the camera, laughing. "Tell me," I said softly, "what is this?" He swallowed hard. "Dad, it's not what it looks like. That was..." "Old?" I interrupted. "Edited? A joke?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, a joke. We were just fooling around. No one actually..." I cut him off again. "No one actually what? Stole my medicine? Swallowed my pills? Laughed while I lay here thinking I was dying because the doses were wrong?" My voice cracked, not from anger but from something deeper, disappointment. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of shame, but it faded fast, replaced by excuses. "Dad, you're overreacting," he said, standing up suddenly. "You don't know how things are these days. It's just photos. Everyone does stupid stuff online." "Everyone doesn't steal their father's medicine," I said. My hands were shaking now, but I kept my tone calm. "Everyone doesn't risk someone's life for attention." He sighed loudly, running his hands through his hair, pacing the room. "You don't get it," he muttered. "I didn't mean any harm. It got out of hand." I looked at him for a long time, this grown man, this boy I had raised, talking about my life like it was a small mistake. The silence stretched until it filled the whole room. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat echoing in my ears. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked finally. "You took the only thing keeping me alive. You lied to my face, and you turned it into a game. What would you have done if I had died?" He stopped pacing. His mouth opened, but no words came. His face crumbled, the arrogance slipping away. I didn't think," he whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't." I reached for the bottles on the table and held them up. "These were my strength. You turned them into your entertainment. You turned me into your joke." He started to cry, or maybe he tried to. It looked like guilt, but I couldn't tell if it was real. He dropped to his knees, reaching for my hand, but I pulled it back. "You can't fix this with tears," I said. "Not this time." He begged then, stumbling words, broken promises, a flood of apologies that felt rehearsed. "I'll make it right, Dad. I swear. I'll buy new medicine. I'll delete the photos. Please, don't tell anyone." "Don't tell anyone?" I repeated. "You already told the whole world. You posted it yourself. You made sure they all saw." He looked down, silent now, realizing there was no lie left to hide behind. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because even in that silence, I could see it. The fear of getting caught, not the regret of hurting me. Finally, I stood. My knees ached, but I found strength somewhere inside the wreckage of my heart. "Get out," I said quietly. "You've taken enough from me. Dad, please." "Go," I repeated. He looked at me one last time, his face pale, eyes wide, mouth trembling with words he couldn't say. Then he left, closing the door behind him. The moment it shut, I felt something release inside me, a strange mix of grief and relief. The truth was no longer hidden. The mask had been torn away. My son had fallen, and my love had fallen with him. I sat back down at the table, surrounded by the medicine bottles that had become symbols of both life and betrayal. The air was still. My body felt weak, but my mind was clear for the first time in months. The confrontation hadn't healed anything, but it had ended the lie. And sometimes, ending the lie is the only kind of peace a father gets. After he left, I sat in the stillness for a long time. The house felt different now, not just empty, but honest. No more lies floating through its walls. No more fake smiles pretending to hold the family together. The truth had finally settled in, heavy and cold. But it was the kind of weight that lets a man breathe again. I looked at the bottles on the table, the same medicine that had kept me alive. For weeks, they had been tampered with, touched by greed and carelessness. Now, for the first time in months, I saw them for what they were, my second chance at life and my son's proof of guilt. The next morning, I called my doctor. My voice shook a little, but I told him everything. I told him the doses weren't right, that some of my medicine had been stolen, replaced, or misused. He went silent for a moment, then said softly, "You did the right thing by telling me." He asked me to come in immediately. I packed the bottles into a small bag and walked slowly to the clinic, my heart pounding with every step. At the doctor's office, I handed over the bottles. He examined them one by one, frowning deeply. "These aren't all original," he said. "Some of these pills don't match your prescription. Did someone else handle them?" I nodded. I couldn't bring myself to say his name. The word son stuck in my throat like a stone. The doctor sighed, filled out a report, and told me he'd have to inform the pharmacy and the authorities. I agreed. For once, silence wasn't protection. It was poison. I wasn't going to cover for my son's choices anymore. By the time I got home, the world had already started to move faster. The pharmacy called, then the police. They wanted statements, photos, proof. I gave them everything, every bottle, every label, every printed picture from his phone. They thanked me, their voices professional, but I could hear the shock beneath it. An old man betrayed by his own child. It was a story they had probably heard before, yet never got easier to process. That evening, 2 officers came to my door. They were polite, gentle even, as they asked more questions. "Do you know where your son is, sir?" one of them asked. I nodded quietly and gave them his address. My hand trembled as I wrote it down, not from fear, but from sorrow. A father's hand should never have to sign his own child into shame. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They left, and the night came heavy and long. I sat by the window, waiting, not sure for what. Maybe for guilt, maybe for peace. Then, around midnight, I heard the sound of a car outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the curtains. Doors slammed. Voices called out. The street fell silent after that. My heart knew what had happened even before the phone rang. The police officer spoke gently. "We've taken him into custody, sir. We found bottles matching your prescriptions. He'll be spending the night at the station." I thanked him quietly, though the words barely left my lips. When I hung up, the tears finally came. Not loud, not violent. Just soft, tired ones that rolled down my cheeks and fell onto the table. I had saved his life once when he was a boy, pulling him out of a river when he slipped while fishing. Now the world had pulled him into a different kind of current, one made of lies and foolish pride. And this time, I couldn't save him. The house felt larger after that night. Every corner seemed to echo. Every tick of the clock sounded louder. I locked the medicine cabinet, changed the pharmacy, and gave my doctor strict instructions. Only my signature from now on. No one else. It was strange, realizing I had to protect myself from my own blood. Neighbors whispered, of course, they always do. Some pitied me, some shook their heads, some pretended not to know, but I didn't care anymore. Let them talk, let them guess. They hadn't been the ones sitting at that table, staring at proof of betrayal printed in color. They hadn't been the ones who had to choose between justice and silence. I had made my choice, and I would live with it. In the days that followed, the police returned once more to update me. They said my son would face charges for theft, possession, and misuse of prescription medicine. They also told me he was quiet in the cell, saying little, refusing food. I listened without replying. I didn't want to know what he was feeling. I had spent too long feeling everything for both of us. When the officers left, I stood by the door for a long time. The air outside was cool and clean. For the first time in a while, I took a deep breath without guilt. It didn't heal me, but it reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still breathing, still moving forward. My son had taken my medicine and nearly my life, but he couldn't take my will to live. Not anymore. After they took him away, the house became quieter than I had ever known it. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you. It punishes you. Every sound seemed to echo against the walls. The ticking of the clock, the creak of my chair, the faint hum of the refrigerator. All reminders that life was still moving, even though something inside me had stopped. My son's shoes still sat by the door, his jacket still hung on the chair. But he was gone. And somehow, even though I had spent so many years wishing he would come visit more often, now I wished I could go back to the days when I didn't know what he had done. Ignorance had been painful, but this truth was unbearable. Each morning, I still followed the same routine. I made tea, opened my cabinet, and took my medicine. Only now, I counted each pill slowly, carefully, like a man counting pieces of broken glass. Every time one touched my tongue, it tasted of both healing and heartbreak. I used to feel thankful that medicine kept me alive. Now, I felt guilty for needing it, as though every swallow reminded me of the betrayal that had almost killed me. The walls carried memories. I saw him as a boy running through the hallway, laughing with wild joy. I saw his mother standing in the kitchen, scolding him for spilling milk. I heard echoes of our old life in every corner, and each memory hurt like a bruise pressed too hard. It's strange how love can survive even when respect dies. I still loved him. That was the curse. I hated what he did, but I couldn't unlove the boy who used to hold my hand on the way to school. That's the hardest part of being a father. Even when your child betrays you, the love refuses to die. It just turns quiet. Some nights I'd sit in the dark and imagine what he was doing in that cold cell. Was he angry? Was he ashamed? Was he thinking about what he had done? I wanted to believe this would change him, that somewhere in that silence he would find his conscience again. But another part of me, the tired, wounded part, feared that it was already too late. Some people only learn when everything is taken away. Maybe that was the lesson life had chosen for him. Neighbors came by, offering kind words that only made the silence worse. "You did the right thing," they said. "You had no choice." I nodded, but inside, I kept hearing his voice as a child, the way he used to call me Papa with such innocence. Where had that boy gone? What had changed him? Was it the world, or was it something I failed to teach? These questions haunted me more than loneliness. A man can live with silence, but not with doubt. The days stretched endlessly. The evenings were the hardest. I'd sit on the porch and watch the streetlights flicker on one by one. In every shadow, I thought I saw his figure. The young man I had raised, coming home with a grin, carrying groceries, saying, "I got your medicine, Dad." The mind is cruel when it wants to pretend. But the truth always catches up, and I'd be left alone again, staring at an empty road. I stopped answering calls for a while. Even the doctor's voice felt heavy when he checked in. "Are you managing okay?" he asked gently. I said yes, even though the truth was no. My body was healing, but my heart was not. Healing from betrayal isn't like healing from sickness. There's no prescription for it. There's no pill that can rebuild the trust once it's been crushed under someone's greed. One night, as I sat by the window, I caught my reflection in the glass. I looked older than I remembered, not just in years, but in spirit. I realized that my illness hadn't aged me. Disappointment had. I had lived through poverty, loss, and loneliness, but nothing had hurt me as deeply as my son's deception. Because betrayal from the world wounds the body, but betrayal from blood wounds the soul. Still, even in that pain, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Clarity. The house was empty, yes, but it was finally honest. No more lies, no more missing pills, no more pretending. Just truth, quiet and steady, like a slow heartbeat. And maybe that was enough for now. As I turned off the lights and went to bed that night, the silence followed me like an old friend. It wasn't kind, but it was real. And real, I've learned, is better than false love. The house may have been empty, but at least it was finally clean of lies. I saved his life once when he was young. He had fallen into the river near our old house, and without thinking, I jumped in after him. The current was strong, the water cold, but I held him tight until we both reached the shore. That day, I thought I had done what any father should, protect his child at all costs. Years later, he nearly took my life without even realizing it. Not with a weapon, not with anger, but with carelessness and lies. And that kind of pain runs deeper than any wound. I have learned that love can make a man blind. It can make him trust when he shouldn't. It can make him excuse what should never be excused. I wanted so badly to believe that my son was still the boy I once knew. The boy who ran to me with scraped knees and honest eyes. But the truth is, people change when temptation calls. And sometimes the ones you love most are the ones who hurt you worst. I used to think forgiveness was a sign of weakness. Now I know it's survival. I have forgiven him, but not for his sake, for mine. Because holding on to anger would have finished what his betrayal started. It would have killed whatever was left of me. So I let go. Not because he deserves peace, but because I do. The doctor says I'm getting better. My heart still beats slow, but steady. Each pill I take now feels like an act of defiance, proof that I'm still here, that I lived through what should have broken me. The medicine that once carried shame has become my strength again. I no longer see my son's fingerprints on the bottles. I see my own, the hands of a man who finally chose himself. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about what he did, if the silence of that cell still echoes with my voice. Maybe one day, when he's older and the world has quieted around him, he'll understand the weight of what he took. Not just my medicine, but my trust, my breath, my peace. And maybe then, he'll finally learn what love truly costs. I don't hate him. I can't. Hate is heavy, and I'm too old to carry it. But I've accepted the truth. The son I raised is gone, and in his place stands a lesson I'll never forget. He took what kept me alive, and I gave him something that will live longer than any punishment. Consequence. He stole my medicine and lied to my face. The photos showed me what I never wanted to see, my own son's betrayal. But in losing him, I found something else. I found the strength to choose life again,